Okay, we're going to do a quick walkthrough of the dynamics necessary for this scene. First off, we have all of our objects here. If I select my ball, I'm going to go to the Dynamics menu, and under Soft Rigid Bodies, I could create an active rigid body, but I'm just going to go to Field and add Gravity. That automatically adds the active rigid body to the ball. You can see that it falls. I'll set my time range to something more reasonable here. Let's say 300. Okay, so that feels pretty good. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of initial velocity to the ball. So under Rigid Body 1, under Initial Settings, we'll just put some initial velocity. Let's try -5 in the X direction. Let's see what happens. Doesn't feel that great. Let's do -10. I guess I have to stop it and start it over, don't I? Yeah, we'll adjust it later, but that feels pretty good. Okay, so right now it's hitting this, or it's not hitting this object, and that's because this isn't a dynamic object yet. We will set this to passive rigid body because we don't want it to move. Passive, basically is just something to collide with. Now, if when it collides you want it to move, then it still needs to be an active rigid body. The pins will be an active rigid body. We'll say create passive rigid body, hit play. You can see that the ball's feeling pretty good now. Okay. Now, next thing we want is for these pins to also be affected by dynamics. Select all the pins, hitting F to focus in on them, and we're just going to attach them to that earlier gravity we created. Again, by attaching them to gravity, we automatically create an active rigid body. So we could create a new gravity field if we wanted to, and I guess that's, I've got an argument for being a good option, but I'm going to just go ahead and connect it to the one we already have. Under Relationship Editors, Windows, Relationship Editor, Dynamic Relationships, and then since we already have all of the pins selected, I made them out of a cube, so they're called pCube1. I'm just going to go through here and select Gravity Field, and you'll see as I do, the attribute editor twitches over here, and that's because it's adding those extra elements to them. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay. So now if we hit play, all my pins fall over. Now, yours may not, and if they don't, that's great. That means you probably did a better modeling job than me. I think the reason mine do is because this edge is somewhat rounded, and so that's something you just kind of gotta, you gotta fight. There's a lot of different options we could do here. One is I could select all of these objects, and one by one we could actually, let me undo that. I will select this first one to show you. And set its mass to 0. Well, it actually didn't work, did it? Go ahead and leave that object's mass at 1. Hold on one second. Okay, so one of the ways I could fix this, which I'm not going to, is I could apply a separate gravity just to the pins, and then, as you'll see under the gravity field, we could animate gravity's magnitude from 0 up to 9.8 over the period of 1 frame. So we could start playing this and we would see that the ball gets there at about frame 59, something like that. I could go from frame 58 to 59 from 0 to 9.8. And if I were really, really bent on having these simulate as these perfect objects, these perfect pin-shaped objects, I would do that. But right now, my ball is traveling fast enough that I'm not as concerned about that. I really want my ball to just kind of plow through them and knock them all over. So I'm actually just going to change each of these to simulate as a different type of object. If I select one, we'll see if we scroll down to the bottom, we have this option to do a stand-in. And the stand-in I'm going to do is just a cube. And it will create a cube that it will simulate with, rather than this actual mesh. So you'll see that now when we hit play, it stands there like a cube would, and it still kind of simulates similarly. It doesn't roll around as much, and that's the only real thing we lose from this simulation. So let's replay it here. But in mine, they're knocking it off anyway, and I want it to knock them into, I want this to be a strike, so I'm alright with that. So we'll have to go through and do this with every one of them. We'll select the stand-in, cube, stand-in, cube. And so just go through and do this. It's actually annoying that you can't just select them all and change them all to cube. But that's how it works. Now, if you're having trouble and yours is simulating kind of slowly, you can actually also change the ball up here to simulate as a sphere if you would like. You don't have to, and if it's working fine, I wouldn't worry about it, but that will actually cause the simulation to happen faster. Okay, and actually I'm unhappy with that. I'm actually going to leave mine set at none. I don't want it simulating as a sphere, so I think the regular ball is actually simulating better. Okay, now our problem now is that we have a ball with a mass of 1, which you'll see here, colliding with a bunch of objects that also have a mass of 1. So it's not knocking them over. We're going to leave the pin with the mass of 1. We're going to crank our mass of the ball up to something more like 20. And you'll see that it moves very similarly. Maybe it doesn't bounce as much, but it really just plows through the pins now. And if we, I'm going to limit this to about 130, so it will loop better. If we watch it, that's much more of the simulation we want. Okay. And once you get a box around there that also inherits that a passive box for them to bounce around in, that should actually be a pretty good simulation for what you're wanting to do. Okay, let's watch it a few more times. Hopefully that will help you move forward on this project. I'll be sending another video before long, kind of talking about some of the next class assignments. Also, if you want to adjust this, you can always try dropping the mass of the pins as well. So you get a little bit more bounciness, or you can just leave the mass of the pins at 1 and try turning up their bounciness. So play with that and see what what results you like. Again, use this stand-in only when necessary, or only when you're simulating something that it has a really slow simulation because of the size of it or the density of it. I hope that helps. Thanks.